Yeah. Right now? Okay. Salam and welcome. I'm Hania. I'm the current president of EMF, which is Muslim Students of France, which is a member organization of FEMYSO. And I will be hosting the session today with a very exciting lineup of guest speakers. This session is the fourth, I think, installment of FEMYSOnow, which is a live stream and podcast series by FEMYSO, which we started this Ramadan every Sunday and Wednesday live on Facebook and YouTube. Before we start with our topic, a quick announcement. Today, you have the unique opportunity to support FEMYSO continuing investing in and developing hundreds and hundreds of young Muslims across Europe and advocate for Muslim rights. You can donate as little as €1 today to help FEMYSO win a 5,000 match funding competition at LaunchGood platform. We will be sharing the link with you in the description. And you have only until tonight, midnight, to participate. So please share and give as little as €1. Today, live will be about the minority representation, which is an often discussed subject, but unfortunately not an achieved goal in many of our countries. And in this conversation, we would like to discuss the different ways in which Muslim creatives and activists are leading the discussion on wider representation for minorities in public life, from the media to politics, to civil society, to the arts. And today we are very lucky to be hosting 3 different leaders in this area who will outline their thoughts on varieties of issues that arise when speaking about representation. And we hope this discussion will provide their knowledge on how they have reclaimed their narratives in their own fields of interest without being defined only by that. So I will be introducing our 3 speakers. First, we have Rowaida Abdelaziz. You are a reporter based in New York City, where you focus on Islamophobia and social justice issues within the Muslim community. Rowaida, you have also written numerous stories on the Middle East and covered the refugee crisis. And before joining the Huffington Post, you worked at the Committee to Protect Journalists at the Arabic, if I'm not mistaken, and at the UN. Also, in this panel, we have Yasmine Ouirhrane. Welcome to you, Yasmine. You are the winner of the Schwarzkopf Foundation Prize and designated as the Young European of the Year 2019, so last year. And you are the founder and host of We Belong Europe. You also studied international relations at Sciences Po Bordeaux, and you are an advocacy member at United Network of Young Peace Builders. And last but not least, we have Shehroze Khan. You are a filmmaker and with a self-described atypical journey in the film industry. You have won numerous awards for short films, and you had your writing shortlisted, I think, for BBC Writers' Room, and you have worked in film, high-end drama, and factual TV. Welcome to the 3 of you, and I'm very glad to have you on this panel. So my first question will be to Rowaida. If you could quickly tell us briefly about your story, how you ended up working in the media, and what were your struggles, I would say.
Yeah, it's a great question. And so like you mentioned, I'm based in New York City. I work for the Huffington Post. We're a national news outlet. that has been along for a very long time. And so before I was at the HuffPost, media and journalism is my bread and butter. I studied it at university. I graduated with a journalism degree in Middle Eastern studies. And during my time at university, I was extraordinarily frustrated with the coverage of Muslim Americans and immigrants. I'm someone who we call a 9/11 kid. So we grew up after the attacks of September 11th, and growing up in that era had a profound impact on me. But more importantly, my parents watched the news, as I feel like a lot of Middle Eastern and immigrant parents. And so they had a Gazeta playing quite often at home, and American news, CNN and MSNBC. And it was fascinating to me that both outlets, or just outlets in general, were covering the same event and had very different perspectives and had very different impacts. And so this was something that did not sit well with me. And so after my time at university, I started off at the Committee to Protect Journalists. It's a nonprofit also based in New York City, where I documented press freedom violations in the Middle East. I took a particular focus on Syria at the time, because that's when the war had began. And I was also doing media and production at Al Jazeera, based in the United Nations, where I was covering security briefings and meetings and things as well. But then with the election of our current president in 2016 is when I decided to take less of an international focus and more of a national focus on what was happening in the US. I felt that Muslims and the wider MENA community were only being talked about when we were talking about wars abroad, when we were talking about foreign policy and national security. And we were not talking about what was happening on the ground, right? Our friends, our neighbors, like kids were being bullied. There was high levels of employee discrimination. Mosques were being burnt down to the ground. And the conversation that we were having about our community was impacting how we lived our everyday lives. And so after the 2016 election, I started focusing on US politics and the intersection of Muslim life, including social justice issues and culture and gender. I've been very busy since, to say the least. It's been a trying time, and it's been difficult because you have outlets in the US media who won't even say the word Islamophobia, right? Will not even recognize that this is a problem worth addressing. And so I'm blessed to be at an outlet that lets me say that in the headline, to let me call a hate crime, and to let me retell the story and undo the decades of damage that's happened in the media world. So that's where I am now, and that's what's been occupying my time for the last few years, and we'll probably be doing it for some time to come.
Okay, very interesting. Maybe Yasmine and Shehroze found themselves in what you say. Do you have something similar that you experienced, or maybe some feeling that dragged you, where you are? Yasmine, maybe you want to share something.
Definitely, and it's extremely interesting to see Rowaida explaining why she started and the reasons behind her work being a Muslim woman in the US, especially because I think we as a generation, we are this generation of post 9/11, and more precisely related to my story, I would say that something that really impacted my my experience as a Muslim woman was what we call the 9/11 of Europe, which was the French terrorist attacks that occurred in 2015. At that time, I was in high school. I was just about to start university, and it was such a shock for us to see these, but also to make people understand that we're actually not terrorists just because we're Muslims. So trying to demystify our presence, try to deconstruct prejudice, and so that's what motivated me to. And it's super interesting to bring it here because we're talking about perceptions and identity and our narratives. And so it was precisely this idea of taking the mastery of my definition of who I want to be as a woman. The fact that if I wear a veil, it doesn't mean that I'm dangerous or that I spread a certain type of narratives or ideologies. So it was really something that for me was important. And so it started to advocate at the European level for our representation on politics as minorities, as immigrant sons and daughters in Europe, and as Muslims too. So, so yeah, it was for me a way to, you know, make our voice heard. Of course, I'm far from achieving my goal, but the different initiatives that I was lucky to take part of, and We Belong that I just launched, are some steps that for me are important to give a voice to these minorities in Europe and make sure that, you know, just the fact that their voice is heard for me is already a big step.
Okay. And what about you, Shehroze? Did you find the events that were mentioned also having an impact on you and your story?
Assalamu alaikum. Firstly, I just want to say I feel really privileged to be in such awesome company. MashaAllah, Rowaida and Yasmine and everyone here. It just sounds like people are doing incredible stuff. So apologies if I don't have that much interesting insight to give. But yeah, it's an interesting one. There's a very long story to kind of my journey, and then there's like kind of the cliff notes, right? And I'd say in terms of the thing that drove me most later in life, because I wanted to do this since I was really young. I was really lucky that I found out I was passionate about creating films when I was like 7 or 8, right? So I was extremely lucky to find out what I was passionate about at such a young age. There were tons of obstacles along the way, but like I kind of knew that was something that interested me. I knew that I felt a certain way when I watched TV and film, and I learned over the course of years that I could make others feel like that as well. And it started off with me and my friends making these cartoons and sharing them on floppy drives, floppy disks at school, which just exposes my age a little bit for anyone who doesn't know what that is. Just Google it. And yeah, we were kind of uploading stuff to YouTube the year YouTube launched. So I remember sending people YouTube links and getting replies like, you know, is this a virus? Like, we've never heard of this YouTube thing. So like, you know, what are you sending us? So yeah, I've been kind of creating stuff since I was really young. But I think when I was in university and had to grapple with ideas for the first time, and was also exposed to people having very, very like drastically different methods of understanding and different paradigms to what I grew up with and what I had. That was the first time that I realized that, you know, ideology is everything, and that actually the battle for ideas is one of the most difficult battles that you can face. And I feel like fiction and watching films and watching TV has been the primary way through which I've constructed my outlook on the world. Might not be the same for everyone, might not be the same for a lot of people, but I know that it is also the same for a lot of people. So like when you watch a great sci-fi flick, most of the time great sci-fi flicks shine a mirror to society, and it's a way of talking about issues and ideas and existential questions as well. And so there was, you know, for me, it wasn't so much 9/11. I feel like I feel like that wasn't something that played that much into my life. I feel what really did play into my life was when I came to London, and in university in my final year, the Woolwich attacks happened. And I just kind of felt around me the sense of people talking about Muslims and Islam in a way that I was just kind of shocked to hear about. Like I remember walking behind this group of people who were talking about Muslims, and one of them said something along the lines of, oh yeah, but they stone their women to death anyway. And I just kind of like struck up a conversation with them and said, you know, I think I was very polite, but I said something along the lines of like, you know, I don't know how many Muslims you know, but like, if you have questions about Islam, I'm very, very happy to answer. I just want you to know that what you said isn't true. But do you want to have a discussion about this? Like, I'm walking in the same direction. I've got like 10 minutes, like, let's do this. And they were actually deeply embarrassed because they would never have said that to my face. And it's not actually, I don't know if it's something that they had a strong belief about, but when we had a proper conversation about it, they knew that what they were saying was completely wrong. And so, but it's about that conversation, because you can't have that conversation with people who aren't open to having that conversation with you. And with a lot of people, if you, like Rowaida said, if you mention words like Islamophobia, you've already shut down the conversation. Whereas if I'm going to create this universe and have this kind of 2-hour experience where, you know, people can kind of get to empathize with characters and feel the same kind of universal emotions that some of these characters might be facing, but also have ideas and ideologies and just discussion, just thoughts and discussion. It's not necessarily about like plummeting your ideas there, but it's more about asking questions. But if you can plant those seeds of questions in people's heads, I feel that that's the most exciting and interesting way to, you know, kind of cause a positive influence in people's mindsets and ideologies and ideas. So that's what interested me, and that's what led to my journey in the film sector.
Okay. But since we are discussing identities and what we are sharing, during your story or your journey, if I may, did you ever feel that your identity was questioned, or did you ever feel that it was an obstacle to the recognition of the quality of your work? Shehroze?
It's a tough one. In terms of whether my identity was necessarily an obstacle, I feel like the biggest obstacle to me, and I'm talking just on behalf of myself, it was really my own mindset and my own the things that I felt were kind of the things that I felt were challenges to me as a Muslim, rather than the things that were actually challenges to me as a Muslim. Because I feel there's the external element of things, and then there's the internal element. And so what I found really, really tough was the entertainment industry is, like some industries are, an industry that's very much based on networking and who you know, and kind of recruiting people who aren't just good at their jobs, but also who would make good assets to the team in terms of like a culture fit. And what I found was I went to kind of a lot of interviews where, I'm like looking for things to connect with, because you're a film interview or a TV interview, it's very rarely going to be like a conventional interview about the job. Like, you're mostly going to be talking about yourself and your interests, and it tends to be a very informal chat. And what I found tough was sometimes like you'd be relating with people over things, and then it would just go towards something like completely that you can't relate to. And I felt a bit like, I don't fit into this circle, and I felt very insecure about that. So one example was like my first big interview in the TV sector was with someone who I had researched beforehand, and he went to the same university as me. And I was so excited to bring that up because I had this like thing to like kind of break the ice with. And the second I said that, he's like, "Oh my God, that's amazing. So did you ever go to this or this or this?" And he listed like 4 or 5 bars. And I had never heard of those names, so I didn't have any idea what he was talking about. And I just felt a little bit like, oh my God, I've dug myself into a hole. Like, I've like created a situation where like, again, we have nothing to like, relate over. But, at the same time, like being like, I don't want to be known as the Muslim for my work. And alhamdulillah, like, I don't think I have. Like, I feel like I've been true to myself and what I'm interested in and what I believe is truthful. So whether it's about Muslims or whether it's not, I feel like if you're being genuine and truthful, that there's ways that hopefully that you won't fall into those stereotypes. But in terms of being known as the Muslim in my work environment or amongst my colleagues or even within the sector, as one of the few Muslims, right, in the sector, like I would actually wear that as a kind of as a badge of honor, and I'd be very, very happy to be in that position, because I'd hope that people would understand that my faith is important to me, and that I am going to be asking for spaces to pray. I am going to be asking for certain things that are important to me in the way that something like if a smoker needs, you know, a few times a day to like take a break and go smoking, then they're going to do that and they're going to be accommodated for. So so that's been my experience. But I feel like I've had quite a privileged entry into the sector. I feel like getting in was very, very tough, but while I've been in, I've been very lucky in that my identity is not kind of negatively impacted me.
Yeah. Okay. Good to hear. But same question then to Rowaida. Did you ever feel that, especially in the media, sometimes we think that it's hard to get in, and even if we are in, we will still be the Muslim, as Shehroze has mentioned. Did you ever felt that?
Yes, I felt that a lot. I think going in, and I continue to struggle with this. I mean, it's so complicated, and I think it's just visible Muslims, because it's not like there aren't Muslims in media or there haven't been before my time, but visible Muslims, ones who spoke about their faith and their practice as alongside of their work, was a rarity. And so when I was first entering this field, I was quite nervous, and not just because of a Muslim, but a Muslim woman and a Muslim woman who wears hijab. I think those were obvious. And so even if I didn't want to kind of come in with my faith and my religion and my identity, and I think this is a privilege that Muslim women who cover don't really have, can say to, you know, our male counterparts or women who don't cover. So if I didn't want to talk about my faith came up regardless, right? It was just this awkward thing that people wanted to make conversation about anyway. And so it was challenging. And I have to say, my immediate family at first were quite concerned about me entering media, also from a safety perspective, right? So they were concerned about increased visibility meant increased risks as well. And so I was grappling a lot with the concept of my safety and the perception of me, and then also entering a field that is predominantly male and predominantly white. So being a Muslim and being a Muslim woman and a visible Muslim woman were all things that I was very aware of going in. I even had someone tell me when I was trying to apply through work that she had mentioned to me that I shouldn't even bother applying to her news outlet because her editor-in-chief would never put a hijabi in front of a TV or a camera, right? And she was just like, I don't agree with it, but you know, it is what it is. And it was something that I was expected to accept as fact. Not that I ever wanted to go into TV anyway, right? No one asked the type of reporting and the journalism that I wanted to do. And so these were all, I think, very real issues that I was thinking about when I first entered. And even afterwards, I think there is this issue with, I think, pigeonholing, right? Like being the Muslim person doing the Muslim things. And like Shehroze said, I'm proud to be a Muslim. I'm visibly a Muslim, and it doesn't matter what I do. I think people are going to always refer to me as like the Muslim reporter. But first and foremost, I think what speaks to my field is my journalism. I'm proud of the work that I do. I'm proud of my investigations. I'm proud of my interviews. I'm immensely grateful for the opportunities to produce quality narratives and quality stories and quality features. And that is the foundations, I think, of my work. Me being a Muslim is something that just fits perfectly alongside of it. And I was hesitant at first when I was offered the position to cover the Muslim community. And I had to ask myself, do I want to be the Muslim person covering Muslim things, right? And I was leaning towards no, and I was very close to declining the position because I was afraid. And then I think two things helped me kind of get over that hill. The first one was that I was the Arab person doing Arab things. And I don't think that was any better in that way. And the second one was that I was doing so much behind the scenes work anyway. I was helping secure interviews. I was having simple conversations with reporters. Okay, if you're going to a masjid, be prepared to take off your shoes. If some women may not want to shake hands with you if you're a male, but don't be offended. And explaining all of these background tips. And I felt that, if I was going in and doing these stories, instead of starting at level 1, I would be starting at level 7, right? Because I'm a part of the community. I know the community. They trust me. They feel secure. And so I I had to be confident in my ability that I was going to be getting stories that no one else was going to be able to get because of that relationship that I had already built. And I needed to see that as an advantage and not a convenience, and not something that's like, well, because you're Muslim, obviously, and kind of just diminish it down. And I think this is something that a lot of us do and have been grappling with, this imposter syndrome, saying, well, I grew up speaking Arabic at home or whatever other language, and therefore it's not a valuable asset. No, it is a valuable asset. And yes, it should be quite high on the resume. So I think there had to be this inward reflection of looking at my identity as a positive contribution, a good skill set to have, and that it just contributes to the narrative, and it contributes to journalism and media as one that is rebellious and is one that is dismantling the norm of a very male, white dominated way of telling stories. And I think this is what has been able to give me the confidence to continue to do the work that I do, and know that I might do it forever. I might pivot to something else. I might cover a different community. Things will change. I think in the best case scenario, we don't have injustices against our community, so there isn't much to cover there. And who knows, maybe I'll be covering something nicer like food and travel one day, and maybe something that's not so heavy. And I think this is a conversation that I've had with a lot of minorities going into non-traditional fields. And I say non-traditional in our sense because at least here in the US, I'm very proud to say that if I ever needed to find a Muslim doctor, the list is endless, and folks in the STEM field. But when we're talking about the creatives and the arts and writing, and that's why I'm so incredibly happy to hear that people like Shehroze are in film. And I think we need more of that. And I think dismantling a lot of the perception issues and dismantling this concept of a Muslim doing a Muslim thing means having more Muslims in those fields. So when there are hundreds of Muslim journalists and reporters, we don't have to say, oh, there's, Rowaida is the Muslim journalist doing the Muslim thing. Well, no, there are so many Muslim journalists who do other things, who cover sports, who cover politics, who cover public health crisis. And that's what we need more of. And I think we'll slowly start doing away with this concern of pigeonholing ourselves. And I think that comes with strength in numbers. And getting over the imposter syndrome. And so this is something that I'm still working on. I haven't completely figured it out, but I think it's helped me immensely over the course of my journey.
Okay. I also meant to ask you the same question, but let me twist it a bit. How do you avoid, because I saw, Yasmine, one of your talks about the tokenization. How do you avoid being the token of the diversity in the public sphere or in the public sphere, let's say?
Definitely, yeah. Before replying to your question, I just want to react with what Rowaida said, because I totally agree with the fact that we need to, move forward from this position of being a Muslim, doing a Muslim thing. And it's especially my mindset that I have when I moved to France. I moved to France when I was 15 from Italy, and I arrived in this society where, like, it's laicite, secularism. We don't talk about religion, and really, impacted me on the way I was perceiving my faith. And then since an early stage of my career, I mean, not that it's that long, but I mean, since I started, I always avoided labeling myself as a Muslim, but rather as an activist, a woman, young woman, and immigrant daughters, just because I wanted to avoid this whole stupid debate that we have in France. And at the same time, the minute I got visible on media, that's the first thing I was reproached, to be, promoting Islam or being a Muslim, whereas it wasn't my main focus. But besides that, regarding tokenization and regarding the, labeling us as Muslim, or even just putting out there a person like it looks like me just to show that we are, promoting diversity, we need to be aware of it, of course. And sometimes when we evaluate the opportunities that we are given, we need to, to see the pros and the cons and then use it also. Because of course, sometimes you might be tokenized and put out there just to represent, to tick that box and be like, okay, I'm there, but on the same time, it's an opportunity for you to bring your voice and to bring your message. And so I think, yeah, you have always to use it strategically. And like, even personally, I think that I've been at times given opportunities just because of my veil and my name. Honestly, I think so, because yeah, in some spheres, in some institution, I just needed to represent that thing that lacks. But on the same time, the minute you're there, the minute you bring your points, then you make them realize how important it is to to give this message. And I will just give you an example of one thing that I experienced related also to terrorism. It is the fact that when I was studying in an institution in Italy, in Rome, studying in an institute, I had this teacher. He was the director of our private security in Italy. Okay, so he works with the Minister of Interior. I entered the room. The first thing he says, okay, there is some foreigners I see. That's what he says to me. So just to make you understand how I'm perceived as not Italian. And then he started doing his course, and he talked about terrorists. And then he turned to me and he said, sorry if I'm offending you. And I was shocked. I mean, such a person who should represent institutions make this, this confusion between Muslim and terrorists. So just to make you understand that at all levels, we still need to bring these topics to show that, yes, I can be a Muslim without being a terrorist, because as evident as it might be, it's still not, it's still not achieved as a message for people to understand. So I think it's super important to have it on media and on politics and also on movies.
Okay. Yeah, some kind of comments that we would like to not hear in the future. So I think this is one of the purpose of this live, is to discuss this kind of subject and maybe have a good impact and leave a good mark to those following this.
Anya, can I make a small comment on that?
Of course. It's an open discussion. I didn't mention it, but I felt it was obvious. You are welcome to comment each other's responses, of course.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, no, thank you so much, Yasmine. Really, really appreciate your candor and honesty. And just on the point of like tokenism, like there's been numerous times where not only have I felt like the token, I've been the token, like 100%, right? And like lots of my breaks like into the industry have been through diversity schemes, right? So those schemes are only open to people from BAME backgrounds, or people who are fall into one of those categories: disabled, LGBT, whatever, ethnic minority, anything like that. So I've kind of grappled with this for a long time, right? Which is that on one hand, like Rowaida said, right, you have this imposter syndrome already. You want to be known for your work and for your craft. You want to know that you're there for your talent. And you hopefully get to the point where you believe in yourself, because I think the self-belief is so important. Up until I was able to call myself a filmmaker, which was years after, like, if you're talking about like winning an award or something, like when I had like been screened at, kind of film festivals that for me were like dream film festivals. And even after doing that, I'd come back and not be able to call myself a filmmaker. I was someone who was doing this and, oh yeah, I make films on the side, and up until I was able to call myself a filmmaker, I was never able to truly kind of embody that. But then, yeah, it gets to the point where, you are in those positions. And so to some extent, like I felt like, let me ride the wave. Okay, I'm here for X, Y, Z reason. I don't know what it is. I hope that my talent has something to do with it. I hope that it has everything to do with it. But if it doesn't, then I'm going to still take this opportunity and prove that I'm not just the best person in the job, but that I'm going to kind of be able to hopefully excel at this and, show people that, yeah, that I will be able to kind of take it forward and, I mean, I was going to say, and take your job too, but I don't mean it like that, right? But I mean that more the position that the person interviewing you is in, you know, you want to be in that position, and like you can totally do that off your own merit. But it's about breaking that door and you know, getting your foot in the door. And if you don't get that opportunity, even the people with the most talent won't be able to make any headway. And so, you know, sometimes, yeah, it is about taking those opportunities where you can get them, and hopefully over time, you know, contributing to the change in the system, the systemic change that can lead to the point where, like Rowaida said, there's hundreds of Muslim journalists. And so it's not even a question of the Muslim journalists covering the Muslim issues.
Okay.
If I might react, just to follow up what you said, I think that precisely when you break that door, as you mentioned, it's then on your responsibility to make sure that other people join, that other hundreds of journalists with the same backgrounds as you are given opportunities, that other filmmakers are involved. And so I think it's a responsibility for us, because often, like, what I see is that people really focus on, wow, I'm the first to do this, and then, you know, they don't really think of how to create a real impact and, you know, opening spaces for other Muslims.
Yeah, and just, you know, you open the door for discussion. So now we're all just going to comment after one another. But I personally don't like the concept of the first, right? The first Muslim, the first woman, the first whatever, because it's not a race. And I think oftentimes we feel that if one person has made it, you know, we have the first Muslim reporter, say on, you know, television or radio or whatever, that there can only now be one. Right. And that one person has secured that position, and we can't do that anymore. And so then it becomes like a self-imposed limitation or a ceiling that we put on ourselves. And so I think there is an obligation for us to pick each other up, that if you have gotten there, to help other people get there. You know, I'm incredibly proud to be in touch with so many young students from across the country who are consistently asking me for either advice or help. And it's something that I think I happily share, and we all should be more transparent and sharing about, because the tokenization problem comes when we ourselves are also complicit in accepting the one Muslim person doing the one thing, you know, whether it's a Muslim thing or a non-Muslim thing. It's just, there's a successful Muslim person, and we should just let that person be the representation of 1.6 billion Muslims across the world, despite the fact that we're not a monolith and we think differently and we look differently. And that's not fair. I don't think that's fair at all. And it's a matter of not just saturating and bringing in numbers, but bringing in quality and ensuring that we are doing what we can for one another to break those fields. And so I think this is how we start breaking down this concept of tokenization. And yes, I think there are plenty of instances where you find yourself in those positions. And I was like, I'm going to write it out too, right? If you want to use me for my perception, then I'm going to make sure that I'm opening the door for other people as well. And so it has to become a mutually beneficial relationship in order for us to progress in this area.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, the three of you, maybe it's personal, but did you ever had a role model that pushed you to take the opportunity? Because we are talking about getting there, but what pushed you in your journey when you were young? Did you ever had this role model, and was the background or what was the impact of this person on you? The three of you, maybe Rowaida, you may have someone in mind.
I mean, I think this is going to sound incredibly cliche, but I truly mean it with all my heart when I think about my mother and when I think about the issues that she's been through. And there are so many people in the professional field, writers and reporters, that I love their work and I read their work. I'm avid supporters of their work. But if I start with one name, it's not going to end. But I think in terms of putting in the concepts of resilience and accepting who I was and not feeling ashamed for who I was, and knowing that being a successful woman would go hand in hand with my spirituality and with my faith, is definitely my mom, who I feel like continues to take gut punch after gut punch in everything that she does, between immigrating to succeeding to raising a family, to doing the most incredible things. And so I don't think I'd be half the woman that I am without her. And I give her all the credit for everything that I am. And so I know it's cliche, but it's something that I truly mean from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah. Shehroze, you reacted. Is it the same?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, of course it's the same. Like, alhamdulillah, such a blessing for those of us whose mothers are still alive, or those of us who did grow up with mothers. There's no question about it. Like, just seeing what my mom, kind of was able to achieve, even after having kids and raising us and doing, mashallah, a damn good job at it too. It's just always been the most inspirational thing, and I like nothing's come close to that. Nothing's come close to seeing what someone's been able to achieve. Then like kind of seeing firsthand like what someone goes through, how busy someone is, how much someone cares about you and your problems and your issues, while nurturing my 3 other siblings as well, and kind of giving you a self-belief that that what you want to do is possible. So yeah, no, alhamdulillah, very, very blessed that my answer is the same as Rowaida. That's my mom.
Okay, and what about you, Yasmine? You're allowed not to say your mother.
I mean, I would say my mother too, but just to vary, I have in mind a woman that for me has been, a role model. When I was 18 or 19 years old, scrolling on the internet, I discovered this profile, UN High Level Commissioner, which is Ala Morabit. And it was, for me, it was inspiring seeing this woman being Muslim, openly advocating for Muslim rights, but also climate change, conflict prevention, gender equality. And it was such an inspiring voice for me, right? And then when I was few years later in New York for an internship, I wanted just to make sure to meet her. So I harassed her with messages, we had a coffee, and a year later she selected me to join a program that she runs that trains young women, emerging women leaders. So that's precisely, not only she was a role model for me, but she provided me opportunity. She gave me tools to be part of, people that, that change, that shake a bit society. And so I'm extremely grateful to those women that stand out there, but also give us opportunities. And I have many others to name, but her, like, she was maybe the first one that I saw her and I was like, okay, so it's possible, because I never saw a woman with a hijab in France or in Europe, advocating or being in politics. And I wanted to do it, but I was afraid. And I think she indirectly motivated me and gave me strength, seeing her and seeing that, yes, it's possible, right?
Okay. And how are you today giving back? Are you trying to create the same spaces you benefited, or how are you trying to give back at your level?
Me?
Yeah, you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the thing is that at the beginning I started working with institutions, which I still do. I was appointed by the European Union and the African Union, and I continue to work on this level. But my struggle, the more I was getting the opportunity to bring my message on institutional level, the more I felt like I had to find a way to stay connected with the people that I am advocating for. And traveling all the time, I can't really establish something in a city, because I'm not in a city for more than 6 months. So what I did is that I decided to launch a podcast and a platform which is called We Belong. We just launched it a month and a half ago, along with Jenna De Groot and Sumeya Saibub. So to inspiring young women that are from immigrant backgrounds, and our goal is to give a voice to the new daughters of Europe that for us are it's a new way to call the immigrant daughters, just to remind that we're also part of society. And yeah, we are growing well. We plan, inshallah, to do also conferences and trainings for young women. So that's, you know, my way of giving back. Of course, it's limited. It's with the resources that I have, but it was important for me to do so.
Okay. What about you, Shehroze? Are you trying to give back, or are you still on your own journey?
You know, so for me, it's an extremely important part of my ethos and of my kind of dream and my vision, which is not only to excel in the industry and not just to try and bring people in as well, which is exactly what I want to do, but really to kind of create a culture and a space where people of similar values, amazing if they're Muslims, amazing if they're from minority backgrounds, but just people who share common values can effectively enter into the industry and have barriers shattered for them, and have comfortable spaces in which they can tell authentic stories and to kind of diversify that pool of stories. And so it's my absolute dream to kind of be able to, you know, be involved in those kinds of initiatives and to executive produce projects like that, and to be involved in I don't know, kind of allowing people to enter in that field. And so I'm really lucky that in addition to working full-time at a production company, I actually work part-time at a youth-based production company that has a YouTube channel called MYM. So that's Millionaire Youth Media. And they're amazing. They have, like, you know, they get like millions of views on their really good videos. And, you know, what I'm really proud of is that they make films that are very, they're for the youth, by the youth. And I've seen so many people kind of come into it from all kinds of backgrounds, majority from minority backgrounds, a lot of people from socioeconomically deprived backgrounds, and just really kind of get a set of skills and a way to kind of have their voice heard or articulate their voice in a way that they might not have necessarily thought was a possibility before. And for me, that's the most inspiring thing. So I run part of their program, which is getting young people between 16 and 26 to make some of their first films within 2 months. So every 2 months, we're creating short films, again, by young people, for young people. I love that aspect of my work, and I feel super lucky to do that. But I also try and whenever anyone wants me to go to schools, to go to kind of youth clubs and deliver talks and things. And I hope I've done this. I definitely am sorry if I've ever blanked anyone, but I try to always respond to people. I try to kind of, if someone asks me for time, for a meeting, for a Zoom call, I think that I've always said yes, and I want to, like, I'm always open to doing that. If someone needs advice, like, I will always try and go out of my way to do it, because the thing that I would have loved most growing up was knowing one person in the industry whom I could go to, and I didn't have that one person. So if there's any kind of advice or help that I can give to anyone else, like, I'm seriously just more than happy to do that. So you can take my email contact details, and it's an open invite to anyone. But yeah, so that for me is a very, very, very important part of what I want to do and contribute as well.
Okay. And to finish, Rowaida, do you have any story about how you try to give back to the community or try to inspire others around you?
Yeah, I mentor several, you know, young aspiring journalists from various backgrounds. I have a soft spot for young women, obviously, and so it's very similar to everything that Shehroze said. Just dedicating my time and dedicating conversations, because again, it wasn't something that I had also growing up, to being like, you know, being an alat for Yasmine, of just responding and saying, yes, you know, I'll get coffee with you, and yes, let's chat. And so that is something that's incredibly helpful. And I think the younger, the better. I love going into the private Islamic schools that no one knows of, and around the corner, because those are the people who can be so inspired by you, but also absolutely know nothing about you. So it's the most humbling experience, I think, to talk to younger kids in that way. And so mentorship is extraordinarily important to me. And I think the other part of that is donating money. I mean, at the end of the day, I think a lot of us is just like, okay, the advice is great, but like I'm short on cash, right? And so supporting the organizations and the nonprofits and the youth programs who are helping our communities and are helping young people, who are providing scholarships for people who can't afford to go to film school or afford to go to J school. And so I think it's extraordinarily important to kind of put the money where our mouth is in a lot of these instances, if you're able and privileged to do so. And I know it was a small thing that you mentioned in the beginning, asking that even just €1 goes a long way. And it's so true. And I think we are so used to, at least my parents, when they're investing or donating, especially during the time of Ramadan, it tends to go back home, like this concept of abroad, and I think that's great and it's super important to do it. But I think our generation, we're a lot more invested in the cities that we are in now. And I think it's incredibly important for us to not only just provide our physical selves, but also provide any type of monetary support that we can give. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to just bring up 1 or 2 more Muslims, but we want to build a generation, and we want to build an institution that's going to last, so that we can do away with the issues like tokenization, so that there are other mentors that they can fall back on if one mentor is unavailable or passes or is busy or whatever the case is. And so it's something that I've been trying to do a lot more now that I'm an adult, right? And can get a paycheck every so often. And so I think that's something that I would hope that many of us do more of. And so I'm speaking it into existence as a reminder to myself first and foremost, and hopefully it's something that we can build on.
Okay, that's a good reminder, because so as you may know, FEMYSO is now raising money, so it could be a good opportunity to take her advice.
Which was not intentional.
But that's a good reminder anyway. So you can find the link below the live stream. And so last question for my side would be one piece of advice, if anyone could give one piece of advice to someone young with a minority background and who wants to go and push the doors, what would it be? Like quick and sharp. Shehroze.
I'd say that if someone isn't giving you an opportunity, as is often the case, try your best to make an opportunity for yourself. So if it's if it's filmmaking, try and make your own film. If it's writing, try and practice writing by yourself. And 2 other small things, which is that there's so many resources available online to improve at your craft, right? So I never went to film school. I never needed to go to film school, because everything I could learn at film school is on YouTube. And honestly, all the time I'm on YouTube videos still learning the technicals of my craft. So please use the online resources. They're incredible, and there's just so many. And lastly, I'd just say tawakkul in Allah. Like if you're from a faith background, or for Muslims listening, having faith in Allah is an absolute game changer, because not only is it an externalization of something you believe, but it's very much a complete attitudinal change. If you have tawakkul in Allah, it means that you'll take a negative situation, or a quote unquote negative situation, and know that there's positive in it, and know that there's benefit coming from it, and know that there's a light at the end of any tunnel that you think you're going through. So that's it for me. Just excel at your craft, make those opportunities yourself, and balance it with that kind of spiritual faith, tawakkul, and kind of self-purification.
Yeah, from my side, I will give 2 advice that go together. One is own it. Like, don't be, afraid or scared or, ashamed of yourself. You will always, like, from my side, I've always been ordered, like reminded that I don't belong. And what I did at one point was just, look, whether you like it or not, I'm here and I'm here to stay and I'm here to speak, because my second advice is don't be silent. And I say this because I've, like, in my early years of activism, I found myself in places where I would raise my hand, evident in front of the presenter that I was raising the hand to ask a question, and he would avoid giving me the floor. And I would take it, like literally one time I took the floor, took the mic and spoke. And I think it's so important to just, don't be silent. And if they don't give you the space, try to, make noise. That's what would change things. If you want to engage in politics or doing advocacy work, just make sure that your voice is heard through social media, through platforms, through events. And yeah, that's my piece of advice.
What about you, Rowaida?
I think building in addition to what everybody said so far, because it's a checklist. So yes, I think of the first 4 or 5 of the previous speakers, I would say the obstacles are going to build you. They're going to build your experience and they're going to build your character. So if you feel like you're being beaten down, it's important to get back up every time, because I think we as minorities get beaten down often. And so I think remembering that this is something that is going to make you stronger. And then the second is that tapping into the people around you and looking for those mentors and understanding that it doesn't have to be a one successful Muslim person, right? At the end of the day, we're still small minorities. Look at other people. Look at, there have been plenty of instances, especially here in the US, of incredible Black journalists and Black reporters and people from the Black community doing incredible things. So looking at other minorities and learning from their experiences and learning how they got where they got to, understanding that there's so much shared wisdom that we can accept from other people. So there's no need to confine yourself in that box. Be motivated and be proud of who you are, but we can also look outwards to help yourself grow and to tap into those resources. So I think that would be my humble help.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to the 3 of you, Shehroze, Yasmine, and Rowaida. It was a really great pleasure for me to host you and to have this open discussion. Thank you for the one watching behind their screens. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope we'll see you again, inshallah. For the next edition will be on Sunday, I think. And before we end the live stream, again, a few announcements, reminders. Today is a unique opportunity to support FEMYSO, continuing investing in and developing hundreds of young Muslims across Europe. And you can donate as little as €1 and help FEMYSO win a $5,000 at a match funding competition at Launch Goods platform. And if you want to support the work of FEMYSO, please donate as little as €1 or dollar or pound or anything. Also, do not forget, FEMYSO has also launched the Ramadan auction 2020. And if you want to participate, your item will be having a chance of being featured in our online auction hall. Also, you can bring out the most beautiful and magnificent item that you have, artwork, calligraphy, or anything that would fit in the auction hall. And there is, of course, the possibility of if you don't have an item to donate. And yeah, keep supporting FEMYSO by sharing and donating. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Anya.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure.